It's one of those huge, timeless questions, isn't it? If there's a good, all-powerful God, then why is there so much evil in the world? Well, today we're going to dive into a philosophy that offers a really surprising and maybe even a challenging answer to that very question.
So let's just get right to it. This is the core of the problem, right? Why would a divine being, a good God, create people who do truly terrible things?
And we're not just talking theory here. We're talking about real people, real history, figures whose actions brought about an unbelievable amount of suffering. So this question, it has some serious weight. So here's our game plan. We're going to start by actually challenging the question itself. Then we'll look at where this philosophy says evil really comes from. We're going to redefine the idea of an enemy, which is pretty wild. We'll unpack this concept called karmic debt, figure out how to repay it, and then zoom out to see what it all means for our collective responsibility.
All right, first up, a question for God. But as you can see, this whole thing kicks off by basically saying we're asking the wrong question to begin with.
Boom. Right out of the gate, this philosophy just flips the whole script on us. The core claim is simple and incredibly direct. God has never created an evil person. Just like that, the responsibility is taken away from some divine creator and put, well, somewhere else entirely. Okay, so if God's not on the hook for this, then who is? Or what is? That brings us to our second section. The environment creates evil. And here's the absolute heart of the idea. Evil isn't some built-in feature, something you're born with. No, this philosophy says it's all about nurture over nature. A person's actions, good or bad, are a direct result of the world around them, the circumstances that shape who they become. And these examples really bring it home. A child who's acting out, they're not just a bad kid, they're a mirror reflecting the environment in their family. A toxic ideology doesn't just pop up out of nowhere, it grows because the world's environment created the perfect soil for it. So get this, evil isn't a type of person, it's a phenomenon, an outcome that we all help create through our collective actions. Okay, now, you might want to buckle up, because this is where the philosophy takes a really personal and pretty radical turn. Section 3, your true enemy. Now, the source uses this Korean word wonsu, which means enemy. So let me just ask you, if you had to name your biggest wonsu, your true enemy in life, who comes to mind? And the answer this philosophy gives, well, it's a shocker. It says, the child you gave birth to is your greatest enemy.
Whoa, okay, I know what you're thinking. That sounds awful, right? But hang on. This isn't about literal hate or seeing your kid as an opponent. It's actually a really deep metaphor for a spiritual concept that this source calls karmic debt. And understanding this idea is the key to the whole thing. So let's break that down.
So what in the world is this karmic debt? Let's get into Section 4, the law of karmic debt. This is all about why the people we love the most are often the ones who give us the most trouble. So in Korean, the word is bitchi, and it literally means debt. But here, we're talking about a spiritual balance sheet. The idea is that souls who have the most unfinished business with each other are brought together by nature, on purpose, into the closest relationships possible. Why? So they finally have a chance to settle that debt. And that's why our loved ones can feel like our enemies sometimes. They're the ones pushing our buttons, challenging us, and forcing us to grow and clear those accounts.
And that's exactly why, according to this teaching, these relationships are the most intense. The bonds of this karmic debt, they're said to be the absolute strongest between parents and their children, between spouses and between siblings. These are the people we have a spiritual contract with, the ones we're here to work things out with.
All right, so if we have these spiritual debts, how do we actually pay them back? This is where we move from theory into practice. Section 5, how to repay your debt.
Now this is fascinating because it totally redefines what it means to help someone you love. On the one hand, we have our conventional ideas of repayment, right? Giving money, buying presents, cooking for them. But this philosophy says true repayment, the spiritual kind, is completely different. It's about really listening to their struggles, teaching them what they need to learn, and helping them get strong enough to stand on their own. So it boils down to these 3 simple but really powerful steps. First, you just listen. And I mean really listen, without planning what you're going to say next. Second, you teach. You pass on your wisdom to help them get through whatever they're facing. And third, you empower them. You help them grow so they don't need you to fix their problems anymore. That right there is how the debt gets paid. Okay,
So we've been talking about personal debt between individuals, but now this philosophy zooms out, way out, to talk about all of humanity. This brings us to our last section, our collective responsibility.
So the source introduces this term Cheonson, which means heavenly descendants, and it refers to the Korean people. The teaching claims that as a people, they have a special, collective karmic debt to the entire world, and that this debt goes all the way back to a role their ancestors' spirits played in a cosmic creation event.
So what's the mission here? The idea is that centuries of historical hardship weren't just random, meaningless suffering. It was all a process, like forging steel, to create something new, a cultural work. And that work is this philosophy we're talking about today, a new way of thinking meant to help guide all of us away from endless fighting and toward a future where everyone can thrive together.
And this quote, wow, it just brings everything right back to that core idea of radical personal responsibility. Don't blame the swindler. If I hadn't done something to be swindled, it never would have happened. It just completely erases the idea that we're ever just a passive victim of circumstances.
So when you boil it all down, the big takeaway is this. The point isn't to blame God or to blame other people for all the bad stuff in the world. The point is to wake up and recognize our own incredible power in creating the very environments where good and evil can grow.
And so that leaves us with one final, pretty heavy question to think about. If it's really true, if we are the architects of the world around us, then the most important question isn't for God, it's for ourselves. What kind of environment are you creating today?